Chosen one, listen carefully, because what you are walking through right now is not random and it is not confusion. It is structure, it is process, it is verification. There are things in the kingdom that cannot be accessed by talent, not by intelligence, not by charisma, connections, or effort alone. You can be gifted and still be denied access. You can be disciplined and still be restricted, because certain doors do not respond to ability, they respond to clearance. And not just any clearance, kingdom clearance. This is a level of access that is not granted casually. It is not handed out because someone desires it or even prays for it consistently. It is entrusted only to those who have been tested under pressure, refined through difficulty, and proven trustworthy when no one was watching. It is a spiritual authorization that comes after evaluation, not performance-based, but character-based. That is what has been happening in your life. You've been wondering why your journey has felt so different, why you've experienced isolation when you were doing your best to stay faithful, why doors closed in your face even when your intentions were pure, why you had to watch others move ahead while you remained hidden, overlooked, or delayed. You interpreted it as rejection at times, but it wasn't rejection, it was review. You were being evaluated for access. Before anyone is trusted with higher-level assignments, whether that involves influence, responsibility, insight, or leadership, they go through what can only be described as a deep internal audit. Every part of you gets examined: your motives, your reactions, your discipline, your restraint, your ability to remain grounded under pressure. And here's the part most people don't like. This process often happens in silence. No applause, no recognition, no visible reward, just tests. You were placed in situations where you had every right to react, but you chose restraint. You experienced betrayal, yet you didn't become bitter. You faced delays that made no sense, yet you kept going. You were put in positions where cutting corners would have been easy, but something in you refused to compromise. That wasn't accidental. That was qualification. You don't just step into meaningful responsibility, you grow into it. And growth at this level is not comfortable. It stretches you, it strips you, it forces you to let go of versions of yourself that cannot handle where you're going. That's why your path couldn't look like everyone else's. If you had been given visibility too early, it would have worked against you. If things had come easily, you wouldn't have developed the depth required to sustain them. So instead, your process focused on building you internally before positioning you externally. You were being made reliable before being made visible. And if you're honest, you've probably noticed something about yourself that sets you apart. You pick up on things others miss. You sense tension in environments before anyone speaks. You can tell when something is off, even if everything looks fine on the surface. That's not coincidence. That's awareness built through experience. When you've been through enough, you stop taking everything at face value. You become more observant, more intuitive, more discerning. You learn to read situations, not just react to them. But here's where you need to stay grounded. This doesn't make you superior. It makes you responsible. Because awareness without discipline becomes arrogance, and insight without restraint becomes damage. That's why your development has required you to learn control, not just over your actions, but over your words, your emotions, and your impulses. You've had to learn when to speak and when to stay quiet, when to act and when to wait. And that hasn't been easy.
There were times you spoke too soon and had to deal with the consequences. Times you trusted too quickly and got burned. Times you tried to explain yourself and were misunderstood anyway. But those experiences taught you something critical. Not everything needs to be shared, and not everyone is meant to understand you. That lesson alone separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. As your level of responsibility increases, your environment has to change. You cannot maintain the same habits, the same circles, and the same patterns while expecting a different outcome. That's why you've experienced disconnections. Not every separation was dramatic. Some were quiet. Conversations faded. Relationships lost their depth. Certain spaces just stopped feeling right. It's tempting to take that personally, but you shouldn't. People are part of different phases of your life. Some align with who you were. Fewer align with who you are becoming. And trying to hold on to what no longer fits will only slow you down. You can respect what those connections meant without forcing them to continue. Another thing you've likely noticed is that your tolerance for certain behaviors has changed. Things you once ignored now bother you. Small compromises feel heavier. You can't move casually the way others do without feeling it internally. That's not you becoming too serious. That's you becoming more aware of consequences. At higher levels of responsibility, small decisions carry bigger impact, so your margin for carelessness naturally shrinks. What others brush off, you feel. What others ignore, you process. That's part of the adjustment. And yes, it can feel isolating.
Because when people around you say it's not that deep, you know that for you, it actually is. So you have a choice: lower your standards to match your environment, or raise your discipline to match your direction. You already know which one leads forward. Let's address something else directly: rejection. Some of the most frustrating experiences you've had came from people you respected or expected support from. People who didn't understand you, people who dismissed you, people who created distance without explanation. That hurt. But here's the reality. Not everyone is equipped to recognize your direction, especially if they're comfortable where they are. Sometimes the same qualities that will eventually position you for growth will initially create friction with others, not because you're wrong, but because you're moving differently. And instead of forcing acceptance, you had to learn to keep moving without it. That builds independence. Now let's talk about pressure, because you've felt that too. Moments where things hit you all at once. Unexpected challenges, fatigue that didn't make sense, situations where you were questioned, misunderstood, or even blamed unfairly. It felt targeted at times. But pressure reveals capacity. When things are easy, anyone can stay consistent. When things get difficult, that's when your foundation shows. And every time you stayed grounded instead of reactive, you strengthened that foundation. You didn't handle everything perfectly, but you handled enough of it well enough to grow. That matters. Another shift you've probably experienced is how you handle information. You don't feel the need to share everything anymore. You think before you speak. You hold back when necessary. You've learned that timing matters just as much as accuracy. That's maturity. Not everything you know needs to be expressed immediately. Sometimes the right move is to observe, process, and wait. Because once something is said, you can't take it back. And as your influence grows, whether in your work, your relationships, or your environment, your words carry more weight. So being intentional becomes non-negotiable. You're also becoming more decisive. When you know something is right, you move.
When you know something is wrong, you step back. You don't spend as much time over-explaining or second-guessing yourself. That's confidence built through experience, not ego, but clarity. And clarity simplifies things. It helps you stop chasing what isn't aligned. It helps you recognize opportunities that actually make sense. It helps you avoid unnecessary distractions. Now here's the part you need to accept fully. Your journey is not designed to be average. That doesn't mean you won't have normal moments or enjoy simple things. It means your level of responsibility, awareness, and discipline is going to be higher than most people around you. And if you keep trying to operate at a lower level just to feel comfortable, you're going to stay frustrated. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to prove anything. But you do need to align with where you're going. That means letting go of what doesn't fit, even if it's familiar. Staying consistent, even when progress feels slow. Making decisions based on long-term direction, not short-term comfort. You've already done the hard part. You've stayed through the process. Now things shift. You'll start to see more clarity in your decisions, more alignment in your opportunities, more stability in how you operate. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because you've built the capacity to handle it. You'll notice that when you act with intention, things respond differently. When you stay disciplined, results compound. When you trust your judgment, outcomes improve. That's not luck. That's preparation, meeting opportunity. So don't shrink now. Don't second-guess the growth you've already earned. And don't try to go back to versions of yourself that no longer fit just because they were easier to manage. You've outgrown that. What you carry now is not something you need to announce. It shows in how you move, in how you decide, and in how you handle pressure. Stay grounded, stay disciplined, stay focused. Because the level you're stepping into doesn't require noise. It requires consistency. And if you keep moving the way you've been moving, with awareness, restraint, and intention, you won't need to chase access. You'll already be operating at the level most people are still trying to reach.